Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Gerber Fastball, a Gerber knife that is made in the United States in CPM S30V. I feel like a lot of people have probably already heard about this knife or have been made aware of it because I think largely due to Nick Shabazz's review, and that's actually who sent it to me, Mr. Nick Shabazz himself. So thank you so much, Nick Shabazz. I appreciate that. He listed, we had talked about, some knives that he, might possibly be sending me for review, and he listed a bunch of stuff that he had, and when he read over the Fastball, I said, I really want to take a look at that because, as many of you know, Gerber has not, well, in my opinion, they have not been making knives that, are up to, standard. In today's enthusiast knife world, they haven't been making knives that have really been up there. And they specifically are trying to get back into that. And this is, one of their initial attempts. So, yeah, absolutely, because I'm all for, makers trying new things and experimenting and trying to, do better with quality and this and that. So I think that's really, really cool. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. Overall length of the Gerber Fastball coming in at 7 1/4 inches overall. It's a little shy of 7 1/4, I think. Blade length is coming in at 3 inches on the dot. Cutting edge is coming in at about 2.8 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here. So up against the Ontario Rat Model 1, the Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. So this is on the smaller side. I'm not going to say it's a small knife. It's a little shorter. I guess it's right around medium, right? It has the profile of a smaller knife, but it's really a medium-sized knife. The Rat is definitely something I'd consider to be a larger knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue's coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. The Para 3 is also coming in at 7 1/4 inches overall. So this is definitely very similar in overall length. It does definitely have more cutting edge. So if you're one of those people who really doesn't like the cutting edge to overall length, ratios on the Para 3 or PM2, this might be something that is a little more pleasing to the eye and functionally if you like a little bit more blade. How's the action on this guy? So this is, an attempt by Gerber to make a manual flipper. They really did a great job with it. This thing has a detent that will absolutely deploy the blade. And truthfully, it's a tad heavy. This isn't the smoothest knife on the way back down. It honestly feels a little tight. But look at this detent. Bam! Clicky detent. To me, it's always satisfying for the knife to be very, very smooth on the way back down. But what really matters to me is that the knife deploys and that the detent is strong enough to make that happen. It definitely does that. In fact, I'm not really sure if I just kind of come at it slowly. I'm not sure that I can fail it. Try one more time. Yeah, the detent is so heavy that it's going to deploy no matter what. It also has a nice clicky sound. There is a definite there are two individual clicks. There's the breaking of the detent and then the lockout. And it's kind of satisfying, I gotta admit. If you really, really like that ultra smooth, it used to be that really smooth feeling inside the pivot was something that you couldn't get outside of like the $200, $300, $400 price range. That is definitely not the case anymore. Truthfully, I've got a lot of knives that are less expensive than this, that are not, absolutely glassy smooth, but they're definitely smoother than this. It's not something that's absolutely necessary. It is something that's just nice. To me, but what really matters is that they got the detent and deployment right, and they did. I think they went a little bit too far with the detent strength. I think it's a little bit heavy. And that's coming from somebody who normally really likes a heavy detent, but it's a little bit on the heavy side, truthfully. But yeah, it's still, great job on that. Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do QA profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see there it's actually thinner than the Para 3. So that's nice. We're looking at an aluminum plate on this side, and then it's actually a combination of steel and aluminum on the other side. Let's go ahead and do height up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, two knives that have awkward carry profiles and nobody ever seems to complain about. You can see there that it is shorter in both, overall length and in terms of height than both the Para 3 and PM2, even including the flipper tab. So that's nice. The fact that it's even thinner is also great. Let's do blade stock thickness here real quick. Blade stock thickness of the Fastball coming in at, boy, that can't be right. Is that? There's no way. Hang on a sec. Let's do that again. Blade stock thickness is coming in quite thin, actually. It's got a nice, thin blade stock. Now, the edge is something a little bit different. The edge geometry is a little bit, it's not what you'd expect on this guy. It's actually fairly thick behind the edge, but the blade, I can't believe that. I really, looking at that. And what's weird is that the final cutting edge just doesn't feel as thin as, what you'd expect from a blade stock that is this thin. Normally I don't do this, guys, but I really got to be sure that I didn't do something wrong. Yeah, boy, 1/10 of an inch. Okay, so 1/10 of an inch there, I guess. But the weight on this guy is also going to be impressive for a lot of people. We are looking at 2.79 ounces, which is definitely under the ounce and inch mark if you're looking at overall blade to weight ratio. If you're looking at cutting edge to weight ratio, it's right on the dot there. So that's going to make a lot of people happy. That's really, really cool. Let's go ahead and do the hardware check. Get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, two items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them both down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every video. Just pull up in the store and look for knife maintenance. Get out the T8, which is now labeled, thanks to a concerned viewer. I appreciate that very much. Pivots is going to be T8. Now, this is Nick's knife, and I know that he has gotten inside of this because he does the disassemblies. So those wear marks are likely from disassembly and reassembly. It's probably not something that you should expect on your Gerber Fastball if you decide to pick this up. So not going to count it off there. And then I'm going to guess that the handle screws and pocket clip screws are, sorry I didn't show it on camera, that they're going to be T6. So let's go ahead and check those here real quick. Yep, T6, that's going to be the same, and pocket clip screws, T6. You'll notice that the screws go all the way through to the other side. Some people like that, some people don't. I don't really care. It's a lot of, the common concern is that if you accidentally strip out, the threads on the aluminum side because the screw goes all the way through, then you're really going to have a problem reassembling the knife. I don't think that's very common. It's not something I concern myself with, but I do recognize that it certainly would be terrible if that happened. It's not something I'm really going to count as like a bad thing with the knife, because there are a lot of knife designs out there that, utilize that same design, and then I haven't really heard a lot of trouble with it. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy of this knife. So we are looking at aluminum on the front scale. Scale looks nice. The fitting of everything looks nice. It's really just, yeah, like this area right here. And I actually, tuned into the podcast where the designer talked about, some of those rough marks in the liner, and the term I think is called die tearing, and it is essentially what happens when they pull everything apart. It's just a result of the machining. Okay, I don't like to see that on anything. I mean, truthfully, if I got a budget knife, right, like taking a look at, what's in that? So the Rat has I use the Rat, so that's probably not a good example. Let me get out the Praxis here real quick so I can show you guys. The Praxis is a much less expensive knife, and I'm not seeing anything like that on the liners or the pocket clip or anything. And truthfully, the rest of this knife looks really great. It's just this area right here is that's pretty ugly. I don't like to see that. Now, does it cause an issue in terms of overall function with the knife? No, it doesn't. But this is it's not a hyper expensive knife, but it's pretty pricey. These come in at about $100, and I'll be linking them down below if you guys want to pick them up. But yeah, at $100, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that on a $40 knife. It doesn't make me feel good about the money that's spent. I think that, really nowadays, with CJRB, And I understand that a lot of these companies that I'm referencing are manufacturing out of China where things cost less. You know, maybe the processes are different, you know, but still other, you know, American knives in this price range, you know, I think the biggest American competitors are going to be like, you know, some of what Benchmade is putting out and like Kershaw's American line. I've never seen anything like that on those knives. While, you know, Benchmade's not notorious for absolute perfection in terms of quality control, I'm still not seeing stuff like that. So I think for this type of money, I don't, you know, whether it has any, you know, bearing on functionality or not, I just don't want to see that, you know. It's something that I'm going to be aware of every single time, you know, and to a lot of people who pick this up, it might be the most money they've ever spent on a knife, and it's just not something you're going to feel great about having to look at. But the rest of the knife in terms of fit and finish is great. The last time I picked up a Gerber was the cleaver. I can't remember what the heck that thing is. Oh, the flat iron. Flat iron had a lot of fit and finish issues. It had a design that, we know, one of the first Gerber designs that spoke to me in a long time. And then I was like, you know, fit and finish issues, blah, blah, blah. That thing all the way around, not good. This guy, it's good in pretty much everywhere except for this area right here. That just doesn't look good. So, all right, I've stuck on that long enough. Let's talk about something else. Pivot looks nice. The pivot is actually the race for the bearings on this side. You can see that there's a steel liner over here, and that's, you know, part of the lock is part of that as well. So the bearings run on the steel surface of this liner, and then also on the inside of this pivot. And the idea there is, you know, while it is a little bit lopsided, the overall profile is slimmed down. If both sides were just as thick as this side, the knife would be, you know, it'd be too thick. It'd be awkwardly thick. It would definitely be, whoops. It would definitely be at least, let me take a look at this again. Oh yeah, it'd be thicker than the Para 3, so I can completely understand why they did that, and I think that's pretty cool. The blade is kind of a, is it a Wharncliffe? It's more, I guess it's more Wharncliffe than anything else. It's got a little bit of belly. Some people are going to call this sheep's foot, some people call it Wharncliffe, some people call it reverse tanto. There's a weird line between some of those blade styles that it's almost like really difficult to differentiate, right? But the blade shape is nice. I appreciate the blade shape. I also really like the tumbling that they've got going on here. It's nice and even. I think the final cutting edge is also nice and even. The problem is that it's not thick. It's much thicker than you'd expect on a blade stock that's 1/10 of an inch, right? Like I thought, oh wow, it's going to be like crazy. So it's actually, it's kind of like, what the heck, you know? They've got a flat here that is really about 50% the height of the blade, like this, right? And then it runs out about 75% the length of the blade. So there's not a lot of room to drop it. You'd think starting out so thin, it really wouldn't matter. It's kind of like, what the heck, you know? It'll still cut, it'll still slice. It's not something that is just, you know, gonna shave a grape or anything like that. But in terms of regular EDC tasks, I think the edge is gonna be just fine. This is a, I don't know, the size of knife, and I think I really would have just liked to see the blade grind be higher and it get thinner behind the edge. I think this is, you know, and I don't normally complain about this or talk about this, but this is the style of knife where if I was going to carry it, I would appreciate that it was nice and thin behind the edge because it is a smaller knife. And I think, you know, what I would use this knife for would be simple, you know, cutting tasks that would, you know, benefit from efficiency that comes from a thin edge geometry. Wow, that was really long-winded. There's really, I'm stuck on this, but it's really not that big of a deal. The blade will still cut. The tip, nice and pointy there. It does actually carry some, I mean, again, we're not looking at a super thick blade stock. Let's put it up against, to gain some perspective, up against like the Ritter Hogue here, which is about 125,000. So you can see there it's definitely thinner, but it does carry some meaningful thickness out to the tip, where oftentimes blades can get really delicate, especially with a thin blade stock, and that's not the case here, so that's nice. I appreciate just on one side we have the Gerber logo. And then on the other side, it says Made in USA, Portland, Oregon, S30V, and then unfortunately some type of number. This isn't the worst that I've ever seen. It is still kind of a paragraph. I kind of like, you know, if it just said S30V USA, you know, I'd be okay with that. But again, that doesn't really change anything functionally about the knife, so not that big of a deal. There is plenty of engagement here on the liner. The liner sticks up on both sides. It's, you know, I can engage it, but, you know, the overall engagement between the liner and just, you know, how soon that flipper, I always call it, it feels like a hammer coming down my finger. it does get past the detent ball just a little bit, but you have to get your finger in just the right place to disengage the liner lock and have that, because there's no detent ball ramp, and have that ball pass up onto the face of the blade, right? Because if you're right here, it's going to do this kind of rocking thing. So it's just barely not a double clutch, but the overall experience right here is a little bit harsh on my thumb. Just doing that a few times. Now, I've got a lot of dead skin on my fingers, but it actually does get a little bit uncomfortable. I'd kind of like this area right here to be knocked down a bit, and really I'd like more of a scallop right here so I have more room to engage it, right? Especially maybe further back so I'm not having to screw around with that detent ball. Not that big of a deal. I'm getting pretty nitpicky there. That's just a little teeny tiny thing. But truthfully, yeah, engaging it, flipping it, there's a little bit of excess pressure on, a flipper tab that's not, the jimping's not excessive, but you really do feel it because of the heavy detent. And then disengaging that lock bar and having the, flipper tab come down on your finger so that you can reposition, kick the blade back. And that entire process does put quite a bit more wear on my index finger and thumb than is normal with a lot of other designs that are, better, I guess. Not that big of a deal, though. We do have a nice area for a lanyard, if you like lanyards, and it is not prioritized over the pocket clip. The pocket clip is super simple, but there's nothing wrong with it. It actually has the swoop, which I really like. The bill isn't shaped in a way that's not like a hook. It's not going to readily grab things. It still potentially will grab things, but it's not that big of a deal. And it does slide easily in and out of the pocket because we've got that nice smooth aluminum surface. The amount of knife that's sticking up out of your pocket is totally acceptable. The backspacer back here is a gear pattern, and it's, I don't think that this is G10. Honestly, it kind of looks like plastic. Take a look at the inside. Maybe we'll be able to tell a little bit better. Yeah, that seems maybe like a plastic backspacer, right? It does not feel or look like aluminum. I think I would prefer that the backspacer was either some type of metal. Now, if it's steel, it's going to create a balancing issue, right? So it's probably plastic to make sure that the thing is balanced in a reasonable area, which it is. I think I would have just preferred standoffs, to that. I don't really like an FRN or plastic backspacer. Now, honestly, I don't know 100% that that's what that is. But in any case, to me, the backspacer, the gear pattern backspacer looks okay, but it looks like a cheaper part of the knife. And I would have just preferred an open pillar construction with a couple of standoffs, and I think that would have looked better, and I think that would have kept the balance of the knife as well. That's just my opinion, though. And then the other side of the knife, and by the way, you guys can see here, we have a position for right-handed tip up, right-handed tip down, and then we have left-handed tip up as well. So that's nice. They are catering to left-handed people, unless you're left-handed and like to carry tip down. Sorry. If it's a flipper, so I don't like to carry any knife tip down, but especially on flippers, and I've discussed this before, I really like those to be tip up, just because in my opinion, it's safer to carry the knife that way. All right, so the rest of the knife, on this side is much the same as the front. So little things that I can nitpick here. The biggest eyesore, the biggest thing to me is this area right here. I don't like that, and I've heard that Gerber's making an attempt to make quality control all the way around better. That's something that has to go away for sure. I mean, again, because you can get not just Chinese-made knives, but you can get American knives that are, sporting the same steel, the same materials, that have no fit and finish issues, and they're going to cost a little bit less than this. And you especially have some well-made Chinese budget knives that are not using the exact same materials, but are definitely getting fit and finish right. So there's, regardless of where they're being manufactured, those knives are directly competitive and are looking better than this. So that's something I don't like to see. It is weird that it's a little bit thick behind the edge, but it's not really that big of a deal because the knife is still going to be able to perform and do the things that you would expect a knife to do, regular EDC tasks. This area right here is needlessly aggressive, and there's not really enough room, and it's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit, just after 3 or 4 flips, it starts to get a little bit cumbersome. But in the moment, if you're just pulling the knife from your pocket, getting it out and using it and putting it back away, you're probably not going to notice it as much. But D10 is a little bit heavy, and this area right here, I think, needs to be cut out a little bit more. Maybe this be extended just so I can engage it the way that I need to, so that that detent ball is up where it needs to be in order to close the knife. The backspacer, to me, it just kind of looks out of place and it kind of looks cheap. And I'm assuming that it's plastic or FRN or something like that. I would have just preferred standoffs. Boy, you know, other than that, I don't know. I don't know that it's really, there's anything to really be concerned about here. We didn't talk about lockup and centering. And guys, it is absolutely solid. And I'm sure Nick Shabazz did his own magic to this thing. But from what I hear, these are coming, you know, centered most of the time. I'm sure, as is the case with any company, you know, periodically, especially in this price range with an American company, periodically you are going to get things that are off-centered. Definitely seen Benchmades that cost around the same come off-centered. I've definitely seen Spydercos that have come off-centered in this price range, right? And yeah, some Kershaws and things. But still, if I'm paying $100 for a knife, I don't like to see the pock marks that I'm seeing in the liner. It better come centered, absolutely. And little awkward areas like this, I think, could be a little bit better. Now, with all that being said, I really nitpicked this thing, but, you know, this is a solid attempt by Gerber to get back into this. Rest assured, guys, despite all the little nitpicks that I had, this is head and shoulders above a lot of, and I mean like the majority of the stuff that I've seen from Gerber here within the last like 5 years. You know, I'm sure the knife world was, you know, there was a different standard, you know, that was held for the knife world 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, but man, for today's enthusiast knife world, this was a solid attempt. And it sounds like they're really going to go at this. They're really going to make a solid attempt. It's just the quality control department, little tiny things like that. It's not that this, you know, the way that I understand it, hearing the designer talk about this, or not that, well, this is, I think, an in-house design, I think, but the person who's in charge of, you know, how, you know, everything fits together and the you know, materials used in the process for machining the materials. They talked about why that is, you know, a result. So it's not like, whoops, it was thrown across the ground. No, it's a result of the process for, you know, cutting the liners, I guess. I guess I would like to see that process change so we don't, I'm late to the game, guys. So it's likely that, you know, they're already aware of this. They're not like depending on me or anything like that. But you know, for $100, I don't want to see that at all. And I just want it to be a little bit more friendly to my hand while I'm manipulating it. But the overall design, the ergonomic experience, right? And whether or not this is a well-designed tool, yeah, I think it is. This is a very well-designed tool. I appreciate the materials, right? It's solid for the most part. You know, everything else aside from the liner looks to be really good. And it has a lot of qualities that are, you know, expected in the price range. There just needs to be a little bit more. This isn't quite where I'm ready to like openly recommend it, because I think there are so many other amazing options out in this price range, but it's close. And it makes me feel good about where Gerber's headed. That's honestly what I want you guys to take from this is, this seems like a massive step. This is not like a, oh, we're tiptoeing into it. No, this is a massive step in the right direction for Gerber. I would prefer this over just about any other Gerber knife right now, just on a multitude of different levels. I think this is cool. I'm legitimately excited to see where Gerber goes in the future and the designs they come out with. I love that they're using S30V and that they're, you know, not trying to do anything overly tactical or outdoorsy. They're just making, you know, this design is obviously a simple EDC design that has good ergonomic lines, a good blade shape, good materials, etc. So, yeah, this is cool. Not 100% recommendable. If you guys want to check it out, there's a link in the description, but it's not quite what I look for on my most recommended knives list, but it's still, you know, pretty neat. Thanks again to Mr. Nick Shabazz for sending this guy for me for review. Appreciate that. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.